There we go. Well, it may well be the weather. The wind chill forecasting for Brandon this morning was minus 57. I'm not sure what it hit here, but it's cold, and we know it's cold. Or it might be the long nights, or it might be the letdown after holiday season. There is something about this time of year, where we live anyway, that lends itself to discouragement, to complaining, to intolerance, to impatience. So if you feel this way, you're not alone. There is research to back it up, in fact. It is simply a difficult time of year. So then add to that any circumstances that may be happening in your personal life, or your social circle, or the global community, and there is a perfect storm, if you will, inviting life to be, well, not optimal. Still, the calendar says it's time for new beginnings. Let's be happy. And it's the month for making resolutions. And the church has stories and seasons that fit right into that too, doesn't it? This is the time of year when we consider the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and we're inviting one another to hear our own calls to follow, and what should we be and what should we do? And, we don't want to do anything. Today is no exception. In today's Bible story, Jesus is walking along the water when he runs into a couple of brothers who are cleaning their nets. And he says to them, "Follow me. I'll help you fish for people." And they do. Barbara Brown Taylor has called this episode a miracle on the beach. As far as we know, these fishermen have never met Jesus. And yet after hearing 2 words from him, they immediately leave everything behind. Their nets, their family, their friends, their livelihood, and just follow. And so when I think about that, especially given how we feel these days, I think, wait a minute. I don't think so. Who can change like that so quickly? What kind of person is just going to walk away from everything they know like that? And I think, okay, well, what would it take for you, for example, to drop everything and follow a different path, to change your life completely? What would it take? Has that ever happened to you? Can you imagine it? I suspect that some of you can and some of you can't. Some of you have and some of you haven't. But what was it that allowed you to change your life like that? Or if you haven't, what would it take? Ched Myers has done some very interesting research about the life of fishermen on the Sea of Galilee in Jesus' day. And he makes the case that fish and fishing had become very controlled by the Roman government. Any fish and fish products that were caught were the property of the empire, not the people who caught it. So fishing was considered the lowest of the low professions. It was a kind of slavery, really. You can find ancient Egyptian documents, actually, that attest to the fact that the fisher is the most miserable, or is more miserable than any other profession. And Myers notes that in this Bible story, the verb that's used in the phrase "they left their nets" is the same verb that's used in the Bible to describe leaving behind, not just like, going from here to there, but leaving debt or leaving sin or leaving bondage. So that seems to suggest that this was like leaving behind something that wasn't great. That if you had the opportunity to leave fishing behind, you might be inclined to consider it. In other words, if life is bad enough, you'll try anything. We know that too, right? When you have run out of options, desperation gives you options you hadn't otherwise or wouldn't otherwise consider. Now, having said that, I'm not particularly keen on having us wait until our lives are so bad that we desperately decide, what the heck, we have nothing to lose, might as well try Jesus. It's not really sustainable for the church. On the other hand, I wonder if there is something for us to learn from these fishermen. If you're anything like me, when you look out at the world around us and think about what it would look like to follow the Jesus way in this world, you feel a bit discouraged. It can feel like the Jesus approach is not going to work here. It's not going to make a difference. So it really isn't worth our time, our energy, or our trouble to try and follow Jesus. It's too hard. But what if? What if we acted like we didn't really have anything to lose? In that way, we might actually be like those fishers of Galilee. If we're already having a grumpy time, a month of bad days, would that make us willing to give it a go? Because, it's not going to get worse. Now, that's not exactly true. It could get worse. There are things to lose. Time, energy, even the negative opinions of others about us. It could cost us. But if life isn't that great right now, could the possibility of change be enough to make it worth it? That is the question. Let me tell you a story. When David Nahill tells it, he calls it How the Irish Changed the World with Grapefruit. It was the late 1980s when awareness of apartheid in South Africa was just spreading around the globe. And there were these 10 white women who worked in an Irish grocery store who said, we want to help end apartheid, so we're going to refuse to sell grapefruits imported from South Africa anymore in this grocery store. Who's with us? And the whole of Ireland went, yeah, we don't really like grapefruit, to be honest. It's more of a luxury product. It doesn't really affect us so much. And have you looked outside? We don't even actually have any black people, so, good luck with that strategy. To be honest, not a whole lot of people supported them. One or two politicians, perhaps. But for the most part, the police were against them. The trade unions were against them. The grocery chain itself was against them. Most of the country thought they were daft. So one day, they were delighted when a black man named Nimrod showed up. These Irish women had never met a black person before, despite protesting on behalf of their rights. But this man showed up and said to them, what you're doing is so potentially impactful, I can't even tell you. I can't put it into words. So I'm going to come and I'm just going to stand with you in solidarity until people pay attention. And so he did. For 6 months, he stood with them every day, walking 3 miles each way to get to their grocery store. Now, honestly, no one paid much attention until the story reached a rather interesting man. His name was Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And on his way to pick up his Nobel Peace Prize, Tutu said, I got to meet these grapefruit women. And so he did. In fact, he flew them to London to meet with him. And because of that, another interesting man got wind of it. And he said, well, I've never heard of a bunch of white people protesting something that affects them so very little. This is fantastic. I have got to march with these grapefruit women. His name was the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So he showed up and he did march with them. Well, that action in turn caught the attention of a man on a long walk to freedom on Robben Island, whose name was Nelson Mandela. And he said, once in a while you hear about people fighting on your behalf, and it just inspires you to keep going. I really want to meet these grapefruit women. And so in 1990, Nelson Mandela flew to Ireland to meet them. Now, by that time, the Irish government had given in. The trade unions had given in. The grocery chain, Dunnes Store, had given in. And Ireland had become the first country in the Western world to ban the import and sale of goods from South Africa, not just grapefruit, but all of them, thereby helping end apartheid with a fruit they don't even like. kind of an inspiring story about how very small, hopeless actions can make a difference. How it could be worth pursuing things that seem impossible. Do you know that when Nelson Mandela died, he made sure that those Irish women could be invited guests of honor at his funeral, should they wish to attend? They did attend in a South Africa that they had a part in changing. And it was at that time, not until then, that they discovered that their friend Nimrod, who had shown up for 6 months for no apparent reason, had a history they never knew about. He had been Nelson Mandela's cellmate on Robben Island. It started very small, but somehow it mattered. So the question is, where do you think you could be called to do something small that matters, or could matter sometime, someday? I'm reminded a little bit of Todd Maffin. Do you know him? He's the guy in Kelowna who's been inviting healthcare workers from the United States to relocate. I think one of his chapters of Healthcare Infusion is attempting to recruit people to our new hospital here in Portage. He also invited all Americans who wanted to come visit Kelowna for a weekend so that real-life Americans and real-life Canadians could meet each other rather than being sound bites for politicians. And it was very successful. Many people showed up. Anyway, he regularly gets on social media, has a little rant. So you maybe have come across him. Well, a week or so ago, one of his rants caught my attention. He said, "It seems that in our world right now, it is the loudest voices that are profiting through anger and fear. And what if we were to reject the premise?" So his idea was this, that he, with some help of some of his followers, could pick an American town, one town, and then to ask Canadians to just flood that town with love. Support the school or the library or the food bank or the local newspaper so the people in that town could stop feeling like objects and that Canada could become less of a concept and more a community of people. And then step 2 was to pick a Canadian town that Americans could also support. But for now, he wanted to start with a small town in the United States that could feel the Canadian love in the hopes that it might shift the world ever so slightly in a better direction. Is it a good idea? Who knows? Will it make a difference? Again, who knows? In fact, they did pick a community actually in Minnesota, and then realized that that good idea wasn't great, because it turns out that a small community that really needs help isn't necessarily ready to receive help. They don't have stuff set up for online donations. They don't have the time and energy for that. A food bank suddenly receiving cartloads of things they aren't prepared for might stress them out rather than feel like help. It might feel like that whole exercise is more about helping and giving people what isn't so much about helping and giving people what they need as it is about trying to make the helpers feel good about themselves. Oops. Not such a good idea yet. So Todd's figured this out, yay. And he's slowing the project down a bit to prepare a bit more behind the scenes, to figure out what actually would be helpful. But I think that's also part of the point, isn't it? Things don't always work the first time or the way you imagine. There can be unintended consequences when we don't think through our actions and we meant well. When our helping is more about us than the people we're trying to help, we can go a bit off the rails. After all, the way Jesus fished for people was nothing like capturing people and putting them in nets, was it? We have seen that behavior in the world. It's nothing like anything Jesus ever did. Well, Todd's not finished. He says doing this right is more important than doing it fast. So we'll see if he ever comes up with something. But I think it's helpful for us to remember that Jesus didn't say, fix the world. Jesus didn't say, conform to this set of beliefs. Jesus didn't say sign up for this program or follow these rules, or we're going to scoop people up and divide them into the groups of good people and the groups of bad people. No. Jesus went to the people who the world figured had the least to offer, like fishermen, and said, follow me. I think you've got something. I think you can help. In these moments, at this time of year, when we don't feel like we have much to offer, perhaps we might be willing to try to follow. Jesus' invitation is still there, at the ready. Follow me, he says. We can fish together. Amen.